Hello, everybody, and welcome to a playoff victory green hour here as your Philadelphia Eagles defeated the New York stinking Giants 38-7 to advance to the NFC Championship game for the seventh time this century, I guess, since the year 2000, the most in the NFC. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, we have at least one more game to discuss, which we'll do later this week. But what an awesome win, and kind of showed that, look, while New York was able to beat the fraud Vikings, the Giants are frauds as well. Still, they're not ready. They're not at that talent gap between the Eagles and the Giants is still very large.
And I know, like, leading into this week, there was a ton of hype and discussion about, like, is Daniel Jones going to get the contract? Is he the guy? He played the 31st ranked defense, and then he went off and played like a top 5 defense, number 1 against the pass defense, and he was exposed. That team was exposed. Now, are we going to sit here and say that a trio of Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Kenny Golladay is the answer? 100% I'm not saying that. But I'm also not saying that he is that much better if he gets the proper weaponry in place. I think there was a little too much going on Daniel Jones just because he beat up on a really bad defense that we called fraudulent too. A fraudulent team beat a fraudulent team. That fraudulent team then went on to face a real team and got crushed. And while we didn't predict it that way, it's because when we predicted that way, it was probably going to be way closer. So.
Yeah, and look, I know we're not Giants fans here, but I hope the Giants give Daniel Jones a 5-year, $300 million, give him whatever, because if they re-sign him to a big contract, they're going to be stuck in mediocrity. He is awful. He is not.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Giants fan, obviously. I'm a Brian Daboll fan, though. Like, nothing but love for that guy and what he was able to work with and what he was able to do. And I think this should be a sign that Eric Bieniemy, if he is not hired this offseason, it is absolutely crazy, because I think Brian Daboll and Eric Bieniemy were on very similar levels. I actually think Bieniemy does have Patrick Mahomes, but he does less, or he does more with less.
Andy Reid calls the plays in Kansas City. Let's be real. It just like here, here. While Steichen might call the plays, it's Nick Sirianni's offense. In Kansas City, it's Andy Reid's offense, and he has the final say over everything. But Bieniemy is the one that is in the ear of Patrick Mahomes. But before we continue and kind of get a quick review of the divisional round of the playoffs, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow the Painted Lines on Twitter and YouTube at the Painted Lines, and follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Edge of Philly Sports or EOP Sports. And as always, if you're listening to us live right now, please throw some comments into the chat. Let us know your thoughts on the game, who was the player of the game, and while we're not going to touch base on it today, that'll be later this week. If you want to kind of let us know your thoughts on the NFC Championship game against San Francisco, we're all for it. But yes, hopefully we can get some chat, get some dialogue in the chat, because we usually have a good back and forth. You know who we haven't heard from in a while?
Our favorite Dallas Cowboys fan disappeared a long time ago.
He has, and I don't think we'll hear from him, after Dakota Prescott, did what Dakota Prescott does. All right, so let's do a quick review of the divisional rounds, and we'll start with Saturday. We'll do the Eagles game last, but the Kansas City Chiefs defeated the Jacksonville Jaguars 27-20, and the big news coming out of that game is Patrick Mahomes' a high ankle sprain, which happened early in the game, first quarter, I believe, first or second quarter. And he had to come out, didn't play the remainder of the first half, and then started the second half and was able to finish. You have to give Andy Reid credit, because when Chad Henne came into the game, he didn't, I don't want to say bottle up, but he didn't let's go to the running game. He came out slinging it with Chad Henne. So he deserves a lot of credit. What were your thoughts on that Kansas City-Jacksonville game as Kansas City heads to the AFC Championship game for the 5th consecutive year?
Way closer game than I thought, but I mean, you're playing like a 50% Mahomes, a 60% of a Mahomes, but even a 60% of Mahomes was able to keep that game to what it was. But I mean, it was a great game. It was a really good game. Isaiah Pacheco was incredible. He went 12 for 95, made a few nice catches. Travis Kelce is an absolute monster. 17
catches.
targets, 14 receptions for 98 yards and 2 TDs, man. For everyone who wants to say that Cliff is coming, I don't know. I just don't see it. I can't see it. I don't see it. But he's incredible, such a crucial part of that offense. And I mean, heaven, what is it going to be? 7-8 days off for Patrick Mahomes is going to be huge, because we know high ankle sprains affect everybody differently, but it'll affect a quarterback as long as they're not mobile. It'll affect a quarterback a little bit less. I think that'll be okay for Patrick Mahomes. But I mean, that was huge. If he had missed the rest of the game, I don't think the Chiefs pull it out. I think they knew they needed him. They knew they had to have him in there. And I mean, Jacksonville is not far off. I know that some people say they're another good offseason away. There's some people who are a little more skeptical about it. I think they're another good offseason away, but they got a lot less money to play with this year than they've had in prior years, because they, in typical Doug Peterson fashion, went on the spending spree when they had the money there, which was last season. They went on that spending spree. It was a great game, though. Good game. The Chiefs are incredible. The Jags are coming.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued in what's going to happen with Patrick Mahomes. We haven't heard much. I mean, obviously he's on Twitter saying he's ready, he's going to go, but it's a high ankle sprain and anything can happen. Like
he's going to play.
I mean, if it's up to him, he'll play, but sometimes you have to take it out of the player's hand. And we'll see about the Jacksonville Jaguars. People thought that back in 2017 when they went to the AFC Championship game, and they haven't been back to the playoffs, I think, since this year. So we'll see, but they definitely are in good hands with Doug Peterson. And I think Trevor Lawrence has a chance to really take a big step next year in his second year under Peterson. Let's move to Sunday. The other AFC matchup, the Cincinnati Bengals dominated the Buffalo Bills 27-10, and knocking out. And I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the year I had the Bills in the Super Bowl. And I don't think you did.
I think I had the Chiefs and Packers, but
yeah, I had the Bills Packers. So the Bills at home, shockingly, just Josh Allen really took a dive the second half of the year. And I don't know if not having Daboll there to really challenge him. If you remember back in 2017, the DeFilippo was all over Carson Wentz. When DeFilippo left, Carson, and a lot of that maybe it was a psyche thing, his knee injury. Carson wasn't the same player. And I'm not saying that Josh Allen's going to take that dive, but without Daboll, but he definitely wasn't the same quarterback this year as he was last year. So that'll be interesting to see. But the Cincinnati Bengals deserve a lot of credit. Going back to the AFC Championship game for the second consecutive year, and they have a real shot of beating the Chiefs next week.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So one of the big things that I had against the Bengals was I didn't think that they had the defense to make the stops if they needed to make the stops. I get people don't love the weather games. Maybe that plays into the favor of certain teams. It should have played into the favor of Buffalo, but it didn't.
Well, Cincinnati also plays in bad weather. I mean,
Cincinnati does. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I didn't think they had the defense to make the stops, and they had the defense definitely to make the stops. And they have the offense that if you get even one or two stops, that's all it's going to take. I just trusted the Bills defense more than the Bengals, and clearly I was wrong in that point. I think this is also, I do think they miss Daboll. I do think, like, you look at where I get it, we call the Giants frauds, but you look at where he brought a team of almost pretty much nobodies to where they are now. And then you look at where the Buffalo Bills were and then what kind of happened to them. It's tough to say if it's that, but I also think it's a scream and help for Josh Allen to get some more weaponry too. We said the same thing about Jalen Hurts. We had Devontae Smith, but we needed a little more. We got A.J. Brown to get over the hill. They have Stephon Diggs. They probably need another piece or two here or there to get them over the hump as well. It's going to be difficult. The difference between Wentz and Allen is Allen had this ascension, improving on things that you generally don't see a quarterback able to improve on, like accuracy and those types of things. You sit there and you're like, oh, you don't see that growth. Well, yeah, we can talk in the off season, but with Wentz, you saw that like one miraculous season, a huge season, and that was it. There was no consistency. We've started to see a little more consistency with Josh Allen. And he improved on areas where you generally don't see a quarterback improve as hugely as he did. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Buffalo in this offseason. I think Josh Allen needs some help. I do think the Bengals, while they do have to give a boatload of money to Joe Burrow, just like the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, they are in good hands if they can make the money work, and if they can make the financial situation work, they're in good hands.
And I was also very impressed. I was also very impressed with the Cincy offensive line and not having 2 or 3 starters, and able to not allow Burrow to get killed out there and Buffalo's definitely misses Von Miller. And then the Sunday night matchup, the San Francisco 49ers defeating the Dallas Cowboys 19-12 as Dak Prescott throws 2 interceptions. The Dallas defense played well, and granted, Micah Parsons didn't do much of. I mean, he had a couple rushes here and there, but obviously he's getting a little overrated by people when I think he averaged less than a half a sack the last half of the year. But Hassan Reddick has better numbers than him, and and nobody wants to talk about him. And then the last play of the game for Dallas, that was hilarious. Zeke Elliott playing center and then getting destroyed. That was funny. But the San Francisco 49ers coming to Philly this week. That defense is still very good. Brock Purdy did just enough to be able to win the game. The defense forced a couple of turnovers and gave short field to Purdy, and the Niners got the win. And I'm happy they did. I like being able to say Dallas hasn't made a conference championship game in like 26 years or whatever it is, 27 years. But what were your thoughts on that game?
Brock Purdy, like you said, he did enough. It was definitely his worst game since taking over as a starter. This was his 7th game. I think it was easily his worst game as a starter. And it was probably one of the better defenses that he's had to play. So that could bode very well for Philadelphia if we're able to get the pressure, if we're able to keep the weapons at bay. We do have to remember, while it was a little bit more quiet, there is George Kittle, there is Elijah Mitchell, there is Deebo Samuel, there is Brandon Ayuk, there is Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of weaponry there if Brock Purdy's able to turn it around. But that just was a sign that the Cowboys have a good defense. We won't deny it. The San Francisco 49ers have an incredible defense. I'm not denying that. That was one of the things that you said way earlier in the season, and not way earlier, but at the beginning as the playoffs started to close in. One of the things that you said and that I completely agreed with was the 49ers defense is likely going to be the difference at the end of the day. So hopefully the Eagles offense can continue to find a way to make things work against this defense. And the Eagles offensive line is better than the Cowboys offensive line. So hopefully we can continue to see some, like this past week, if we can get that run game going like we did again, and I know we're going to dive into it, if we can get that run game going and we can get that offensive line absolutely dominate in the game, there's we can beat the 49ers, but it takes probably a very similar game plan with some different things thrown in there. Dak Prescott, the interceptions, he's boom or bust. You're gonna go, like I think Shane said in the group chat, you're either gonna go nuclear or you're gonna blow up with this guy. And there is no, and I get it, like the announcer said, Mike McCarthy isn't bothered by that. He likes to let Dak Prescott do his game because, things will come together eventually. I don't think that's true. When you make the decisions like that, when you create the turnovers like that, you can't come back from that many turnovers. Brock Purdy, he went for 214 yards. He was 19 for 29. The stat line's ugly, no touchdowns, but he also had no interceptions. So the stat line is ugly, but as long as you can protect the ball, sometimes having that guy who can protect the ball is a major bonus. And at this point, Dak Prescott absolutely cannot protect the football. Another major thing, that offense, night and day without Tony Pollard. Just saying. That injury was massive. And now you have to go and you have to pay Zeke Elliott the amount of money you have to pay him. He says he's willing to take a pay cut. Every player says that. And then you got Tony Pollard, who's due for money, and you're going to they're thinking about franchise tagging this guy. And what's the franchise tag going to be this year on a running back? Like 10 to $12 million.
I don't know how they're going to be able to do that. They're already over the cap going into next year. They won't be able to franchise tag.
It's dicey. It's very dicey, but you saw how different that offense night and day without Tony Pollard there and his ability to be a running back and a receiver. He can work anywhere on the field. He's great. I would love to see him in Philadelphia, obviously, but that is a dream because we already have our own disaster to clean up.
Coming off that injury, and I don't really like taking Dallas players coming to the Eagles, but we'll see. I can't wait to talk about it later this week. But I am very, very much looking forward to the Eagles' offensive line against that San Francisco defensive line and whatnot. All the weapons the Eagles have offensively and that defense: Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Ward. They have a lot of weapons
it can really go a couple of different ways. That's the thing. Like, both offenses have so many weapons that can go off, but they both have top 3 defenses in the entire league. So it could go one of two ways. You could have these offenses go off, or you could have these defenses go off. So it's either going to be a low scoring game similar to the 49ers Cowboys, or it could be a very high scoring game like some Eagles games we saw. But I don't see the high scoring game. I see more like the middle ground.
We're all expecting it to be a defensive battle, and it's probably going to be a 38-35 type of game. But we'll talk about that later this week. What's up, Dave? Welcome back. We haven't seen you. We haven't had you on in a while. Good to hear from you, Dave. And Daniel Barry, Sports Highlights. What's going on? Thanks for joining us. All right, let's talk about the big one, the Philadelphia Eagles 38-7 victory over the new East Rutherford Giants. The Eagles defense held the Giants to 227 yards of total offense. The Eagles ran for 268 yards. In all 3 games. I mean, and let's say 2 games. I won't count the last one because the Giants didn't play starters. The Eagles were very vanilla. The Eagles dominated every facet of every game against the Giants. And the Giants won the toss deferred. What did the Eagles do? Took the ball, went straight down the field, scored a touchdown. Jalen Hurts. We saw the first half, or we saw before the injury to Hurts, we saw that offense from the Eagles. It was everything. It was play action. It was RPOs. It was Hurts throwing the ball down the field to Devontae, getting the ball to A.J. Brown, him running it when needing to. Obviously, the offensive line and Jason Kelce just manhandling guys with one arm is ridiculous. Having Lane Johnson back is freaking huge. Look, I know a right tackle shouldn't be that important to a team, but damn it, Lane Johnson is important to this team.
And he was hurting.
He's at 80-85%, maybe less than that. And he is still the best right tackle in football. He was dominant, didn't allow Kayvon Thibodeau or any of the Giants to sniff Jalen Hurts, and he was great. It was just an all-out great performance, and this is the performance that we wanted to see. We didn't think we were going to see where every facet was almost perfect, and we thought, and that's why I think, when we gave our predictions last week, we both thought it was going to be closer than it was. A lot of people thought it was going to be closer, but we can see the talent gap, and the Eagles just did impose their will against the Giants.
Absolutely. And there was a part, like, let's just face it, me and you, there was a part of us that felt, it could be this way, but we never want to predicted this that way, because whenever we predicted that way, we get the very close, heart attack inducing game. And Lane Johnson, you could tell he was hurting right from the get-go. They were showing him limping around right after plays. That man is hurt. He is not 80%. That man is 50% at best of who he really can be. And he is still shutting down guys like Kayvon Thibodeau. This could be like how they choose to use Nick Bosa. Bosa usually comes off the side where Mailata would be, so we would assume that's going to stay that way.
Against Dallas, he was on the right side of the offensive for Dallas.
His more dominant side would be the side where Mailata is what you would imagine, but they could try to test Lane Johnson and see, we saw you limping, we saw you in pain, but man, the guy, I agree, the guy is that most of that offensive line is working through something. I know
It was good that it was such a big blowout that they were able to get Hurts out, Johnson out, Kelce out. Like, they were able to take guys out to let them go. And I know it was only for a quarter, but they weren't out there. And then obviously practicing, they don't really practice that hard anymore. So that'll be good too, but it is going to be a bigger test because as we mentioned, the defense for San Francisco is way better than that defense for the Giants.
Absolutely. And a lot of people are grinding through things right now. Like I was saying, Landon Dickerson, he hasn't been as good. You can tell there's something up there. Kelsey, at the end of every season, Jason Kelsey lists this laundry list of injuries that we didn't even know he had, that he was playing through. It happens every single season. Mailata hasn't been as good as we've seen in prior years. I don't think there's anything up there. And Sayamalu, I don't think there's anything up there either. But there's a couple of those guys playing through things. AJ Brown's trying to play through something. Jalen Hurts is playing through something. A lot of these guys are playing. They're pouring their heart into this for sure. But we kind of talked about it last week. It sucked that AJ Brown wasn't more a part of the offense, but you kind of can tell why now. There was something bothering him throughout that game. But Devontae Smith picked it up. Dallas Goedert picked it up, and surprise, Kenneth Gainwell. Okay, Boston Scott had his 6 for 32 and 1. Boston Scott had his anytime touchdown.
I hit my parlay. I hit my parlay last week, so that's fine. I got my anytime Jalen Hurts and anytime Boston Scott with the Eagles win.
That's all you needed. But then Kenneth Gainwell went 12 for 112 and 1. And I think I posted the stat in game that the Fox crew had posted. He was the first since Brian Westbrook to go for over 100 yards in a playoff game as a Philadelphia Eagles running back. It was incredible. Kenneth Gainwell imposed his will. I mean, I get it. The offensive line opened up holes, but this is like a Gainwell we've never seen before, like hitting those holes it
was also like third, fourth quarter, and the game was over, and the Giants kind of just wanted to go home, especially the long touchdown.
Absolutely.
The Giants wanted to go home. Let's be real.
Absolutely, they wanted to go home.
Dave, I'm going to ignore the second part of your comment, by the way.
But yeah, at the end of the day, you definitely made the point. Jalen Hurts went for 16 for 24, 154, and 2 touchdowns. He only took 1 sack. When he was asked to rush, he rushed. He was smart about it. He slid. He did not go for the extra that you would normally see. He went 9 for 34 for 1 on the ground. He had a great game, and he didn't even go over 200 yards by himself. He just had a really good game, and
they didn't need him to.
They didn't need him, exactly. And hopefully next week, you're definitely going to need him to be a bit more, because this is a really good defense that you're going up against. But hopefully at this point, you've gotten him to a point where he's at least at 85, 90% of pre-injury self, because you can tell, there was a lot of reports pre-game, there was some people saying, oh, he's still hurting quite a bit. And then you had Jay Glazer coming out and saying that playbook's 100% open. He's good to go. They're going to let him play.
You can have both. He can be hurt still, but the playbook is going to be 100% open.
And we knew the playbook had to be open. I said that because
it didn't really need to be. I'm pretty sure they left. They left plays in because the game was over by the middle of the first quarter. By the end of the first quarter, the game was over. So there were plays that they probably didn't call. But Jalen Hurts, as Sirianni said in his press conference, Jalen said, look, we got to win. So call whatever. I'll make it work. It can be both ways. The playbook can be 100% open, but he could also still be at 80%, not feeling all himself. So, I think that's where it came into. And I think getting another week, he will be closer. He'll be taking another step closer to that 100%. It's just now he's definitely going to get hit. He's going to feel some hits this week against this Niners defense. It ain't going to be like the Giants where you imposed your will. And if it is, I don't know who's going to stop this Eagles team. If the Eagles are able to run for over 200 yards against San Francisco, more power to them. I don't see that happening, but they've been able to do it against almost everybody they wanted to this year. But this is going to be the best. The San Francisco is going to be the best defense the Eagles have faced. I think the Eagles offense is going to be the best offense San Francisco has faced. So I think all that, it's been heading to this since the middle of the year. These are easily the two best teams in the NFC. And they proved it this weekend, and we've been waiting for this battle, and now we're going to see a titanic matchup.
Absolutely. It's going to be a huge game. And like you said, it's going to dictate a lot of if the 49ers impose their will defensively and the Eagles offense can't do anything, okay, you could see it going that way. If the Eagles are able to impose their will offensively, like you said, our minds would be blown. If the defense can hold strong and we beat the 49ers really good, then our minds are blown. And obviously you look at Cincinnati, you look at Kansas City, you're like, how can we beat one of them? But if you're able to beat one of the best defense, I think this will probably go down as a top 10, maybe even a top 5 defense in NFL history based on their performance this season. You you can see a way of beating Kansas City and Cincinnati because you can see a way of beating those defenses if you're able to beat this 49ers defense.
I'm not looking past San Francisco.
Definitely not looking past it.
That's for sure. But, the one thing, and I mentioned it on Thursday last week, the one thing that I was worried about coming into the game was the preparation. It was the coaching staff, and especially Gannon, and especially Steichen, with them having, job interviews, and Gannon's probably going to get the Texans job. Steichen has a really good shot at the Panthers job. So, that was a big worry, but they deserve a lot of credit. Gannon deserves a lot of credit. I didn't think I'd be saying this, but, he mixed it up. He allowed the corners to do their job. He didn't have to blitz a lot, and he was still able to get pressure. Hassan Reddick, man, might be the best free agent signing, at least in a decade, for the Eagles. Has to be. He was really, maybe since Asante Samuel, who knows? But
I think it was one of the best ones of the offseason altogether. You look at a lot of the big, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, the big moneymaker moves, they were trades. They were not signings. Hassan Reddick was a trade too, yeah. Hassan Reddick is so under. When you look back at the totality of the season and you look back, I get it. I think I pulled the stats the last 7 or 8 games. He's been night and day from the beginning of the season. But if you take the totality of the season and the impact player that he's been in this defense, we talk about, we were without Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for a little bit. We talk about we were without some other guys for a little bit, and the Avonte Maddox and the impact that they had. If we were without Hassan Reddick, this defense would be a shell of itself. I think he is the most important player on this defense. He definitely, at least for the last 8 or 9 weeks, for sure.
What the front four is able to do is having 75 sacks this year, including the playoff game. Getting pressure with just them helps the back end, and that's going to be key going into next year when you won't have Bradberry. You might have a young guy or somebody that's not as good as Bradberry on the other side of Slay. But I think having health and he looks healthy, but he brings the swag, and I talk about it all the time. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, just having him fully back, and that's key because he'll play safety, he can play the slot, he can play anywhere. And when you're going up against a team like San Francisco, has all those weapons where Debo can line up in the backfield and the slot on the outside, McCaffrey in the backfield and the slot on the outside, IU backfields, they have so many players that can line up anywhere. It's key that your defensive backs, they can line up anywhere as well. While we don't see it often where Slay and Bradberry move into the slot, that's where having a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson helps. And while Epps and Blankenship didn't get kind of challenged last week, they'll get challenged this week, even if it is just Brock Purdy. They're going to test these safeties if you're going to have Gardner-Johnson in the slot. The linebackers are going to get tested. As good as TJ Edwards has been this year, he's going to get tested against George Kittle. You saw Fred Warner last week against Dallas running down the field with CeeDee Lamb. So we could see Fred Warner do that with a Smith or a Brown. There's going to both sides of the ball are going to implement so many different things that these offenses that they're going to be going up against, it's going to be something they haven't seen this year, and that's going to be that key when you have D'Amico Ryans against Steichen, when you have Kyle Shanahan against Gannon. All those matchups are going to be really fun to watch. The intricacies of the game and whatnot, and who's going to cover McCaffrey when he goes to the outside. Do we want it to be Gardner-Johnson? Do we want it to be Edwards? It's going to be so much fun to watch all that happen.
100%. And I mean, it was a really clean game this past week. We only had 3 missed tackles. Everything felt too good to be true. And and I know Saquon Barkley, he wasn't able to do as much as he wanted because the rest of the offense couldn't function at all. So how are you supposed to get your run game going if the pass game can't get going? There was no threat to the Eagles all around, so there was no way Saquon Barkley was going to get going. But with a Kyle Shanahan offense that they're going to be able to do things in the run game. They're going to be able to do things in the pass game. They're going to be able to open the entire playbook just like the Eagles offense is going to have to do. But it was such an easy game. It was such a clean game. And with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell running at you, that it's not going to be 3 missed tackles. It's not going to be a couple missed tackles. It's probably going to be more missed tackles. You got to make those tackles and you got to make it work. And one of the big things that I said in the Painted Lines group chat last week, I mean, I had to eat it a couple times, but it wasn't because of Epps or Blankenship making specific plays that I had to eat my comments. Epps and Blankenship are fine as safeties, but they're one of the big things I said about Blankenship, his angles, they're not covered, and their angles on tackles are asking to be misses. They just shoot at you. They don't care how they get you. They don't wrap up. There's no technique. They just shoot at you.
And when you're going up against Debo and McCaffrey, they'll make you miss. They have that second burst. Like you think you have that angle, and then as soon as you get close, they'll hit it and go. So that's definitely going to be key this week. But
And just watch the film on Epps and Blankenship. You see it, man. They just shoot at you. They don't try and wrap up. There's no technique to it. All you got to do, those guys are going to watch your film, and they're going to say, I want that guy one-on-one. I'll make him miss. You know that's the process that's going to happen. And this is no hate on Epps or Blankenship, but it sucks that we don't have Avonte Maddox, because Chauncey Gardner-Johnson provides that balance and that ability to play so many different roles. But the fact that we have to move him so close to the line of scrimmage and to do that job.
Speaking of Maddox, we haven't heard much, but he didn't have his walking boot on after the game on Sunday. So who knows? Maybe they haven't really had practice the last 2 days, and so maybe we'll hear an update Wednesday.
I'd be shocked.
If they beat San Fran, he'll probably definitely play in the Super Bowl. But it would be a surprise if we can get him. Before we kind of continue, tickets went on sale for the game today. It's the most expensive NFC Championship game ticket ever. It's ridiculous, and I can only imagine what the tickets would have looked like if it was Eagles Cowboys. Like if it was Eagles Cowboys, it would probably be double what the price is now. But like the cheapest ticket to get in is like over $600, and that's like standing room only tickets. So if you're able to get to the game, more power to you. I wish I could be there. But yeah, it's going to be the atmosphere at the link is. And George Kittle said it. He said that it's going to be cold, it's going to be violent, but it's going to be fun. Brock Purdy said that like it's a passionate fan base. It's going to be a lot. Jonathan Gannon even said it when he was here in 2018 with the Vikings for the NFC Championship game. Said it was the loudest he's ever heard a stadium, any stadium that he's ever coached at. And he mentioned it's going to be a big advantage to the Eagles this week. Purdy has not been in an atmosphere like this, so I think that is going to be one of the keys when we talk about this game later this week. It's going to be how does Shanahan help Purdy like kind of get acclimated to the game, get acclimated to the atmosphere that he's going to be stepping into on Sunday at the link.
Absolutely. I mean, every time I see like wildest crowds or loudest crowds, there's always like these lists I see, and the Eagles are like never in the top 5. And I'm like, I don't know how you can ever not have us in the top 5. We're the loudest, we're the craziest. And I mean, you gave us 12 hours. Like people were buying tickets. They bought tickets to the Eagles game and the Wings games just to get the opportunity to get to those,
tailgate early.
Tailgate early and get to
8 hours earlier, because if for the Eagles, in order to tailgate for the Eagles, it was only 4 p.m., which was never going to happen. Like, okay, they can implement that. It's never going to happen. But because the Wings game was at 1, you could start tailgating for the Wings at 8. So people were like, all right, and Wings tickets aren't that expensive. So let's buy tickets to the Wings. Let's go tailgate for the Eagles. So like you're not going to stop. And with the game being at 3 o'clock on Sunday, the parking lots will open up probably around 9 o'clock. Ooh, it's gonna be a lot of fun on Sunday.
Absolutely. I mean, I wish I could be in Philadelphia. Would I pay $600 American dollars? That's like $1,000 Canadian. No, but to that same point though, you're right.
If
like
we win the Super Bowl, you might have to find your way down here for the parade. We could do a live broadcast from the Super Bowl.
From the parade, from the Super Bowl. Yeah. We can dream, but we're not going to look ahead of this game. But Brock Purdy, like you said, definitely, like even last week you could see, and like it was mentioned in our group chat a lot, like Brock Purdy looks nervous. Brock Purdy doesn't look as comfortable as he's looked in the past. These are high pressure moments for Mr. Irrelevant. His name is Mr. Irrelevant. This is the highest of pressure moments. And with each game, it gets higher and higher and higher. You can sit there and say he's a system quarterback. You can plug anyone into this system and it works. Cool. But you can't plug anyone into this system, put them into this atmosphere in this situation and expect it to come out the same way. And that's the big thing with Purdy.
Chris Sims still isn't giving Jalen Hurts credit.
He's never going to.
You can put anybody in that offense and they'll still succeed. We already saw it for 2 games. It didn't really succeed. Jalen Hurts comes back, does what he do, and he says that if you swap Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones would have done the same thing. Stop it.
And then the guy's gonna get upset that the media is blowing his comment up. It's gonna come to the top of every social media feed next week if we win. We all know it. The guy does not know how to watch quarterbacks or realize, or I mean, listen, I've made my comments.
Remember he had Kellen Mond ahead of Jalen Hurts after going into the 2021 season. It was last year, right? Going into that season, he had Kellen Mond. He didn't even have Hurts in the top 40. So
and at the end of the day, listen, I'm not pointing anything out specifically, but you talk about Brock Purdy's getting so much love. You talk about Daniel Jones getting so much love. You talk about these guys who are that you plug them in. You talk about the situation that people are saying you can plug Minshew in, he's going to do anything. We had to bring Jalen Hurts back early because Minshew couldn't get the business done. At the end of the day, Jalen Hurts is not getting appropriate love, and he has taken massive steps forward. He has done such an incredible job, and he's evolved from the run game that we saw last year. You said it, LJ. At the end of the day, we weren't going to be able to win if all we could do was run. And this game has become so multi-dimensional with him. I'll never try and allude to anything, but it feels like Jalen Hurts will never get the love that he so rightfully deserves. And it's crazy because you look at the post that I had earlier on Twitter talking about he is now in line, and I threw some sass into it as if this wasn't the reality 6, 8, 10 weeks ago. He's in line to be talked about in discussions with Herbert and Burrow and who's going to get the first contract and what does that contract mean. And my biggest comment was how he better not be behind Burrow or Herbert in getting this contract done. He needs to be the first one in line to get this contract done because it's going to get really expensive really quickly.
I also think that Hurts might understand, and I know we talked about it last week, and we don't know if the NFLPA will allow it or whatnot, but Hurts might understand that you make $40 million a year, that's $40 million a year. You're still be making a lot of money, so it's probably going to be 45-ish million a year. But if you go in we want to try to keep the team together as much as possible. Maybe not take as much. Maybe take a little hometown discount instead of $45 million a year. Take $40 million a year. That $5 million can be used somewhere else because we have 6 or 7 starters on the defense that are in the last year of their deals, and we want to try to bring them back. And obviously, we talked about why Howie hasn't signed a CJ Gardner-Johnson or TJ Edwards, because you have to get that Hurts contract done. You need to know where you stand financially. So we'll see. And obviously, all that stuff will take care of itself in the offseason, but we hope that the offseason doesn't start until after February 12th.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that's going to come out of all this is the guaranteed money, because we know at the end of the day, that's what dictates the salary cap. That's what dictates, who's going to stay.
What if here's an option. We haven't seen it yet, but somebody is going to have this happen. His contract is dependent as a percentage of the salary cap. Obviously, the salary cap goes up every year. So what was the salary cap this year? 100 or 200 and say it was $200 million.
205-ish, I think.
Let's to make the numbers easy, it was $200 million. What if he gets 20% of what the salary cap is? So this year he would have made $40 million a year. But if the salary cap goes up to $220 million next year, he would make $44 million a year. That could be a potential.
That was the thought process with Patrick Mahomes when he signed his deal. People were like, "Are they going to give him a percentage? Or are they going to do it that way because it feels like a way to do it?" And then you're still 20%. You're still a fifth of the salary. You're still a large chunk of your team's salary. But then you got to figure out the guarantees too, because one of the biggest things in the Lamar Jackson thing, and I know we're going to dive into a lot more of this in the offseason, Lamar Jackson. The Deshaun Watson deal screwed negotiations with quarterbacks going forward, because at the end of the day, they guaranteed entirely $240 million. So that there's going to be there's going to be quarterbacks who are going to say it's not going to be. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be like the Wentz deal where it was super team friendly. I don't think it's going to end up being that way. I think you're going to have to see a lot more guarantees given, but there's a way to, you know how he works those guarantees. There's a way to keep the contract at bay while still giving a lot of guarantees and while giving Jalen Hurts what he wants. But I think some of these quarterbacks at some point, unlike Aaron Rodgers, need to realize you need to be willing to take some sort of pay cut to help keep the window open, because a lot of the opportunities for these teams come on rookie contracts with the quarterback, because it is the cheapest time for the quarterback. Otherwise, then they start demanding these insane amounts of money. And then we sit back, well, unless you're the Chiefs, then we sit back and look at like the Aaron Rodgers situation, and he's like 25% of the team's salary cap, and they can't figure anything out with the salary because they're so hands tied on it. So you hope that a guy like Jalen Hurts, I trust Howie more than any GM in this entire league to rig the contract to work for the team and to work for the player.
All right. So we talked about the Giants enough. We're obviously going to talk Eagles Niners later this week, but let's give our listeners kind of a little preview. What is one thing, or what do you think is the biggest key of the game? If you without even having dove into anything yet, what do you think the biggest key to an Eagles victory is going to be on Sunday?
Offensive line, 100% the offensive line. That defensive line is so good. And you can see when our offensive line imposes their will and they can dominate a game. And I get it. We're talking night and day between the Giants and the 49ers. The Giants have a really good defensive line, probably top 5 in the league. The 49ers have a really good one that's probably top 3 in the league. So at the end of the day, that it's going to be that. And the biggest factor there is Bosa. I get it. Kayvon Thibodeau, he's really good. I get it. He's an incredible guy. Is he a little overrated? I don't think he's overrated. He's a rookie. He's still got a lot to learn about the NFL. Bosa is an absolute. I think Bosa and Thibodeau are completely different people, and I think Bosa is so much better.
Dexter Lawrence and Leonard. We shut Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams down too in the middle, and they're no joke.
No, exactly. That's why I say the Giants are probably top 5, but the 49ers are probably top 3 because they're really good and there's a chance to impose that will, but I don't think it's necessarily as easily imposed as it was this past week. So it all starts with the offensive line. Lane Johnson being able to continue to play through everything. He must have some good drugs on board when he's playing, man. But at the end of the day, I think I'm going to lean on the offensive line. What about you?
Defensive line, because of the weapons that the Niners have with Debo, Ayuk, McCaffrey, Kittle, Juszczyk, and they're off at Trent Williams. Like, he's going to be really good. That's going to be a nice battle with Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat. And being able to get pressure after Purdy. Purdy hasn't been in an environment like this. If you get pressure after him, we saw him get a little gun shy and not be at his best on Sunday against Dallas. So if you can do that, force some turnovers, have a really good shot at winning the game and going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. And I think, like we kind of talked about in our group chat, one of the biggest things is going to be treat Brock Purdy like you treated Cooper Rush earlier. Make him think, make him make decisions. And I think he's going to make mistakes. And
I find it really I think somebody said it in our group chat. This is like Case Keenum coming to Philly. I just can't see Purdy winning. Obviously, it can happen, and it very well might happen, but I just find it very hard to believe that can happen.
I think if we lose and we think back to the game, and this might be crazy, I think this is probably over-the-top talk here, but I don't think we're going to sit here on the review episode and sit here and say Brock Purdy beat us. There's hopefully definitely not. Going to, I hope not. I think there's going to be other aspects of the game that we sit back and say, I think this were the reason, and Purdy's a lot further down the list.
Hopefully, we'll see. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in to a playoff victory green hour. We'll be back later this week for a preview of the NFC Championship game between your Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers, in a game that should be very, very good. And if you're going to it, you are very lucky. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Greenhour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHurrell54. We'll be back later this week with the preview of the NFC Championship game. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for listening to the Kelly Green Hour.
You want Philly?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sanders,